And thank you very much for being here this morning. I appreciate, and all of us appreciate, the community's deep engagement in this issue, and I also want to acknowledge and thank Chairman Khan and the Tribal Business Committee here in the front row, and Supervisor Williams, who will be here shortly. He got stuck in traffic. Today is the first of two meetings where we will talk about the full proposed memorandum of agreement and the documents that are related to and referenced in it. The agreement has been posted for your review on the county's ad hoc website as well as the county's board agenda, and that happened of Thursday last week. This proposed memorandum of agreement is the product of public engagement. The work of the previous ad hoc committee provided a foundation, many comment letters and comments, consultation with our councils, and also consultation with outside counsel, and then conversations with our contacts in Washington, D.C. Please believe me that our conversations with community members provided the guiding principles for our goals in this process. These were extremely difficult negotiations, and they were influenced by a number of outside factors. And it made the discussions even more challenging and added far greater urgency to what we were doing than the previous ad hoc committee faced. And I'd like to just mention three of these factors because they create the context within which we're operating. The first was the January 19th action by the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs that changed the status of Camp 4. The second is the fact that Congress is poised to act on H.R. 1491, and I'll come back to that in just a minute. And the third is that the Supreme Court will soon hear arguments about whether or not Congress has the right to dismiss vita trust litigation. In May, I traveled to Washington to ask members of Congress to give us more time to discuss a local agreement. I argued that we were new people, we were starting out, we needed to get up to speed, and would they please give us a little more time, and we would develop an agreement that they could actually reference in the bill. I was granted some time, but I was also warned that time was running out. One of the Congress members I met with was Norma Torres. She's a representative from Upland. And I was later disappointed to see what she wrote. She said, and I quote, "Local government has failed to ink an agreement with the tribe. Now it is up to us in Congress to act." I understand that many people are concerned about the timeline, and I just want you to know that our lobbyists in Washington, D.C. are now telling us that 1491 is ready to be approved by the full House on a suspension calendar. And that's a method to quickly pass what they deem as non-controversial bills. What if we do not have a local agreement in place? Then the county and the community risk having no say at all in the land use on Camp 4, none. Without a local agreement, we could find ourselves at great risk. Congressman Duncan Hunter from San Diego area wrote to the Assistant Secretary of Indian Affairs. He was asking why lands that the BIA approved for housing ended up being used for a casino parking lot. And I'm going to read you three different sections from a quote because it's very important. It creates the backdrop that we're operating within today. This was the Secretary's response. Quote, "Although we understand the community's concerns, once land is taken into trust, the department is not authorized to reconsider its decision because land cannot be taken out of trust without congressional authorization." The letter continued, "In addition, regulations do not authorize the department to impose restrictions on a tribe's future use of land which has been taken into trust." And finally, and I quote, "The department has been reluctant to take any action to eliminate the flexibility that Indian tribes enjoy to change the use of trust lands, both because it is an aspect of tribal sovereignty and because it is needed tool to adapt to changed economic conditions." That is the interpretation of the federal law that governs vita trust. Neither the county nor the tribe made this law. But what the law means is that without an agreement, there is no certainty of what can happen. With an enforceable local agreement, there is far greater certainty about the land use on the property, and we have a means to hold the tribe accountable. Some people have claimed that the proposed agreement gives the county nothing. I am here to tell you that it is just the opposite. We have nothing without the agreement. So what does the proposed agreement offer? With this agreement, we are holding the tribe to build housing for their tribal membership and a tribal center, two of the tribe's objectives that both the county and the community have voiced support for. Second, the agreement provides assurances for land use through 2040, 23 years. This period conforms to the time frame for which a community plan or a general plan usually lasts. While of course I would prefer a longer term, this was the longest term that we believe the Department of the Interior would approve. They have to approve any local agreement, and they do not favor long-term encumbrances on Indian lands, as the quotes I read indicate. Our research of local agreements shows that this is the longest that we could find. In addition, Section 20 of the agreement contains mutual reopener language. That is, it takes both parties to agree. It's not unilateral. I think there's been some misunderstanding about that point. So this provides an opportunity for the tribe and the county to sit down again and discuss terms if an extension might be possible. Importantly, this agreement creates precedent for an improved relationship and ongoing dialogue between the Santa Ynez Band of Chumash and the county and the community. We're not always going to agree, but we do have some overlapping interests and concerns, and it is critical that we continue an ongoing conversation. This agreement commits the tribe to Alternative B in the environmental assessment. Under Alternative B, there will be approximately 131 acres protected as resource management zone, 869 acres designated as open space recreation trails, and 206 acres will remain in agriculture. So more than 1,200 acres, or 84% of the 1,427 acres at Camp 4 will not be developed. And finally, both Alternative B of the environmental assessment and HR 1491 explicitly state no gaming would occur on the property. I quote from Alternative B in the environmental assessment, quote, "No gaming would occur on the subject property," end quote. There are many more details that you will see outlined in the PowerPoint, and there are more specific narratives in your handout with citations to the EA and to the agreement to show you, to give you documentation backing up what we're saying on the PowerPoint today. I know that there have also been questions about the scope of the proposed agreement. I want to assure you that we explored every option we could come up with regarding neighboring properties. But over the course of the negotiations, and due to a variety of factors, including the pending legislation in DC, the discussion settled on the Camp 4 property. I'd also like to mention a few words about my partner in the ad hoc committee, Supervisor Doss Williams. Unequivocally, at no point in our negotiations was Supervisor Williams acting outside of what was in the best interest of the county or outside of our negotiating objectives. He was a very strong advocate for open space and environmental protections. And here he is. In regards to the concerns from the last meeting, that we only shared a summary of the proposed agreement and not the entire document, we have been releasing information at the very earliest opportunity that we were able. At the time of our last meeting, the wording of the proposed agreement was still being negotiated and reviewed by attorneys. That's the reason why we didn't have it available. But we wanted to have that meeting. We wanted to get out the principles and hear your comments and get this process underway. The full agreement was posted within an hour of approval by both parties and their counsel. So tonight today, we'll be walking through the proposed agreement and alternative B of the environmental assessment to make clear exactly what is being proposed for Camp 4. We will also be formally responding to the comments from the last meeting and the comments that we got on the internet site. And we'll be taking all of your comments today and continuing to comment either at next Monday's meeting or on the website. We're going to be documenting all of your comments. We're recording and all of that. But I hope you understand that also because of pending litigation, we're not able to respond to every question. I kindly ask that all of us keep today's conversation respectful to all parties. Our negotiations have benefited from civility and respect, even though we had sometimes very heated and very difficult discussions. But I know we can continue that decorum today. We'll be following the same rules that we do at a Board of Supervisors meeting, and I would ask that people refrain from applause and cheering. It's intimidating to people who might have a different perspective and want to come up and articulate that. And every individual here is welcome to speak and make their feelings heard during the public comment period. The meeting is being recorded, and we want to create a record of civility. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to my ad hoc colleague, Supervisor Das Williams.
First of all, I wanted to thank you for your indulgence and coming in a little bit late. True story, I was so desperate to get here in time to hear public comment that I hitchhiked for the first time in 20 years from Carpinteria in Santa Barbara to a rendezvous with my staff. So it was a very interesting story in and of itself. For those who were not able to attend our last meeting, I want to reiterate my long-term interest in this issue going back to 2011. Obviously, I know there are many of you that have been interested in it far longer. At the time, I represented the Valley along with half of the county and a third of Ventura County in the state legislature. My office held monthly meetings for over a year and repeatedly heard the community's concerns about the threat of Camp 4 going into trust and the concerns regarding protecting the Valley's rural character and guaranteeing open space and the ability to enforce an agreement. I constantly held the belief, however, that this was ultimately going to be a process that would only have a happy ending, or at least a relatively happy ending from the community's perspective, with an agreement that just saying no would not create success. I know people are frustrated, and I understand that. But you all would be far more frustrated if we lost the land into trust with no say for the community over what happens there. Joan and I went into these discussions with the community's interests at heart, particularly those of trying to make sure that there was enough open space on the parcel to really do the justice as the gateway to the Valley, and that the agreement, once reached, was enforceable. Joan was a consistent and fierce advocate for what I've heard from Valley residents for years. She stood up for those values. And I just want to tell you how honored I am to serve with someone who is that dedicated and also that strong, because it is it is very difficult to work for the interests of the people of the valley when sometimes people want the perfect to be the enemy of the good. And I'm proud to have the opportunity to support her in this process to get the best deal possible. I also want to make it clear from the get-go that I will not be recusing myself from this process. Fundraising is unfortunately, we live in an unperfect system, democracy. Fortunately, it's a lot better than any other system that people have come up with. Fundraising is unfortunately a necessary part of serving as an elected official in this county and in this whole country. And I've taken contributions from people on both sides of this issue. My position has never changed from what it originally was, which is that we are not going to have the legal power to stop it, and therefore we need to negotiate to make sure that the community's interests for open space and for an enforceable agreement reach fruition. My job has been and will continue to be to find the best solution that is achievable. Notice I say not the best solution, but the best solution achievable. And I believe that this agreement is just that. Thank you again for coming out. I did desperately, I was fearful that I might miss some of your comments, and I may be a masochist, but I really want to hear all of them because it is important that we always figure out what we can do and what questions we can answer.
Well, good morning. I'm grateful to be sitting up here addressing the Chumash Tribal Housing Initiative. We've come a long way. We've worked very hard, and we are very thankful to those that have listened, that have made comments, and we've heard you, and that's why we stand here today with supervisors addressing some of these challenging issues. As some of you may know, our tribe has one of the smallest land bases in California. Our existing reservation is approximately 140 acres with 100 homes in 3 different residential zones, with a combined commercial area totaling 13 acres. The majority of our reservation is marshy creek area and undevelopable steep land. Tribal housing is our most important issue. Our vision for Camp 4 and for housing is something that really brings us back to our roots. Our tribal members for so many years, even before we had the resources, have struggled with roofs over their heads. And we've come so far in such a short period of time, and to not have a land base has been a challenge. And I've heard many folks, say they support tribal housing. But for us, the significance of tribal housing on tribal land is imminent. Our tribal government has developed expansive education programs. We celebrate our language and published a beautiful language dictionary. Our culture department and our elders council work very hard to teach our children about our history and to share our customs and traditions. The tribe operates a full-service health clinic that offers medical, dental, and mental health services. All of these governmental services are developed with self-determination and cultural preservation in mind. Tribal housing or housing on tribal land, trust land, is vital to the survival of our culture. Some of the programs that we receive funding for, we could not have without tribal trust land. Today, most of our tribal members live off of the reservation. And with these efforts, we would like to give them the opportunity to participate in tribal government and to be able to enjoy the San Ynez Valley just like all of you. Thank you to the supervisors for inviting us to this hearing, and thank you all for allowing me to be here as well.
This is a formal Brown Act hearing, which means that there is an opportunity for people to speak on matters not on today's agenda, but since we only have one item, I anticipate that we don't have any speaker slips for that.
I have not received any speaker slips.
All right, so with that, we'll turn to Assistant CEO Terry Mosnisic.
Thank you, Supervisor. Good morning, everyone. Thank you again for being here with us today. I'm going to provide a short summary of the process, and then we are going to begin to respond to a number of the comments that were posed via the last meeting, as well as provided to the county on the website. Just to begin, I wanted to again provide information as to the construction of the ad hoc subcommittee. That was originally established back in August of 2015 and was originally supported by Supervisors Adam and former Supervisor Doreen Farr. The purpose of the ad hoc subcommittee, as directed by the board, is here again and is to engage the Senia's Band of Chumash Indians in discussions related to land use and financial matters of mutual concern that include but are not limited to a waiver of sovereign immunity, and we'll discuss this further, and include that are not limited to the waiver of sovereign immunity, the San Ynez Valley properties of interest inclusive of Camp 4, Mooney and Escobar, and the 350-acre Triangle property, and other general topics of interest between the county and the tribe. The former, or initial subcommittee, ad hoc subcommittee, I should say, met with the tribe on 9 occasions from September of 2015 through October of 2016. A number of topics were discussed. All of the information that was previously discussed remains on our website and is available to all. We discussed the waiver, the term, municipal finance, as well as future land use and limits, as we called it, which was inclusive of gaming, the Williamson Act, as well as fee-to-trust lands. Just a bit of a background in terms of key dates associated with this process. As I previously mentioned, the process began back in August of 2015, in which the actual ad hoc subcommittee was established. And at that time, the board also clarified the role of the ad hoc in terms of what their direction was. In January of 2017, Supervisors Hartman and Williams were appointed to serve on the short-term ad hoc subcommittee. In January 10th, again that same date, the board directed the county council initiate federal litigation if the BIA regional director decision was affirmed to take Camp 4 into trust. And then quickly following on January 19th, the Interior affirmed the regional director's decision to take Camp 4 into trust and concluded that there was adequate NEPA review. Therefore, on the 28th of January, our county council filed in federal court as directed by our board. On February 7th of 2017, the Board of Supervisors again renewed the short-term ad hoc committee and authorized that ad hoc subcommittee meet directly with tribal leaders in discussions on this topic. And those discussions formally began in late February. We referenced the guiding points at the last meeting, and Supervisor Hartman again referred to them, but these were really the points that permeated all of the discussions with the tribe, and I wanted to again mention them to everyone. Certainly, the work was built on the prior work of the initial ad hoc subcommittee. Many items were discussed in those open public sessions, and those carried through. We did reach agreement, or tentative agreement, I should say, on certain terms, and those carried throughout this process. It was important to recognize the tribal sovereignty and the tribal right to self-governance, and recognize the need for tribal housing. We have consistently supported tribal housing. It's also within our legislative platform, and as Supervisor Hartman mentioned, it has been a consistent point from the county. We want to recognize the critical services provided by both the county and the tribe, and Chairman Kahn just referred to several of those. It was our interest to protect the rural character of the San Ynez Valley by protection of open space, provide greater certainty regarding the development of Camp 4 and that timing of that development. We also were looking to establish a strong model for government-to-government relations, and we believe we have done so. And we wanted to address the fiscal and economic impacts associated with any form of development. As mentioned before, we looked at a broad range of options. We threw out a number of different ideas, which were thoughtfully considered. We explored outside of the box options, and we mentioned before, the discussions were very thorough in our mind. So in terms of this agreement, again, the agreement is posted on the website. There are copies outside, and they are also filed with the clerk of the board. And that was provided online on Friday, as soon as we had that ready to go. The summary of the terms of this particular agreement, again, the waiver of sovereign immunity, term, mitigation of fiscal and environmental impacts, safety and code compliance, land use, and dismissal and support provisions regarding legislation and litigation. We mentioned that we were going to do our best, given some restrictions that we have, to answer a number of the questions that were posed. The way we have done that is we have categorized a number of the questions into very broad categories, and we're going to walk through them in the PowerPoint in that way, and then also the narrative that we have put together attempts to answer these in these categories as well. So when we looked back at all of the comments, we lumped them into these primary categories. The scope of the agreement, meaning Camp 4 specific versus other properties, the term, the support of the legislation and why that was done, a fiscal component regarding the amount that is referenced in the agreement, land use. There were very specific questions posed regarding gaming, as well as some of the water questions, as well as limitations on commercial, and then more information was asked regarding the actual tribal facilities. There were also questions regarding the enforceability of the contract or the waiver, and we'll discuss that again, as well as the public process and the timing, which I believe Supervisor Hartman referenced in her opening comments. So what we'd like to do is begin with many of the issues that were posed regarding land use, and in order to address those, I'm going to turn it over to Chairman Khan.
Thank you, Terry. So we have a Camp 4 land use map here, and we've got a number of different zones. Some of them that stand out a little bit more than others. The residential zone here in the, I guess that would be a pink or grapefruit color. The agricultural zone, which is the vineyard in the upper left-hand corner. Our open space, which is a majority of the area. Resource management zones, there's a couple of different RMZ zones. We have a pointer? There we go. So our resource management zones are these here. The housing, here's the vineyard up here, the agricultural. The riparian corridors, which are in these different areas here. Our special purpose zone, which these colors are all blending in from over here. So, of course, our roads, which you can kind of see them kind of strung out along here. In our view corridor, this is the 985 feet adjacent to Highway 154. So this is all alternative B under our EA, and this is what is going to be our guiding principle for land use on Camp 4. Failed with the pointer there, but bear with me. So on to land use. One of the biggest discussions was no gaming. So no gaming is allowed. EA and legislation disallows gaming on Camp 4. That's something that we've maintained from day one through our legislation and also through the EA. The tribe to comply with the final EA, FONSI, and alternative B of the final EA as adopted in May of 2014. No buildings on Camp 4 within 985 feet of State Highway 154. All required mitigation measures in the FONSI and final EA under alternative B will be implemented. Compliance with the FONSI and final EA also shall not preclude solar energy on Camp 4. All forms of solar energy are prohibited on Camp 4 within that 985-foot buffer zone. Our land use mitigation monitoring plan, water, no export of water. Water use, in a drought will be no increase. In a non-drought will be up to 4 acre-feet per year. 2005 Green Building Guidelines and LEED for homes criteria. Indoor plumbing, highest efficiency fixtures and fittings available. Less landscaping for clustered 1-acre lots than the 5-acre lots. Native landscaping and drought-tolerant species are emphasized. Tertiary water treatment plant and recycling. Recycled water for landscaping. Recycled water for plumbing in all government buildings. Tribal hall. Recycled water for vineyards and all irrigation as feasible. Reduction in vineyard by 50 acres and corresponding decrease in water use by 50 acre-feet. Areas outside of buildings and roads would be kept as permeable surfaces to the extent practicable. This is to promote groundwater recharge. Rooftop runoff directed towards vegetated areas and splash blocks, not to underground storm drains. Again, to promote groundwater recharge. Special limits during periods declared as drought by county. No turf grass irrigation during that period. Separate from agreement and EA, the tribe will participate in SIGMA process. Continuing on with land use. Limits on commercial. No commercial proposed. There's currently ag commercial with our vineyard and with our stables and with our land leases for cattle grazing. 206 acres of ag. Net decrease in commercial as no winery is approved in the project. Provision on open space. There's 869 acres of open space recreational. 900 acres of riparian, 98 acres, what is RMZ again? Resource Management Zone. They switched my copy here, so my notes are not here. Of riparian. 33 acres of Resource Management Zone of Oaks Woodland. Tribal facilities, 30 acres of special purpose tribal facilities. Tribal members and guests for tribal events, functions, and ceremonies. There's 250 parking spaces with approximately 100 events. Land use, no structures within the 985-foot highway buffer zone. Open space and recreational area adjacent to 154. Tribal housing separated from 154 by 985 feet, open space zone. Building height, 75% of single-family residents will be single-story. Residential structures compatible with surrounding residences. These are all areas that are within our EA that we agreed to in 2014.
Okay, thank you. We also have the full final EA posted on the website, and we also provided copies of outside again of Appendix C, which is the mitigation monitoring plan, which is referred to as part of this agreement and incorporated as well. So the next section that we received a number of questions on related to county land use policies and compliance with the San Ynez Valley Community Plan. We mentioned this at the last meeting, but just to restate, the way the plan is structured is that it indicates that pursuit of an enforceable intergovernmental memorandum of agreement for Camp 4 is consistent with policies contained within the plan. That is the county's position, that it is consistent. The fact that we have secured this agreement is provided for as part of those policies within the plan. And then we listed the actual section up here, which indicates that the county shall oppose the loss of jurisdictional authority over land within the plan area where the intended use is inconsistent with the goals and policies of the development standards of the plan in the absence of a satisfactory enforceable agreement. It goes on to say that in addition, the county shall pursue legally enforceable agreement consistent with intergovernmental agreements with entities seeking to obtain jurisdiction over the land in the plan area. So that was a key question that came up on several different occasions. Regarding the term, we did provide this information previously. The information that was provided at the last meeting was an extract from the agreement as we had at the time. I won't go over that all in detail again. The term is through 2040, as mentioned previously. Many might recall that in the open public discussions, there was initially a discussion or a proposal by the county, I should say, that the term be consistent with any successive gaming compacts that may be achieved by the tribe. That was an open-ended type of time frame. As part of these discussions, we did agree to the term of 2040, which is consistent with the current compact, and as already mentioned, it is consistent with local government land use planning guidelines. In terms of this waiver of sovereign immunity, as I mentioned in the past, this is something that was in fact agreed to during the open public process. The enforceability or the enforceable agreement protects and secures the stated land use that is referenced within the agreement, and it's consistent with the current waiver of sovereign immunity language that the county maintains as part of our law enforcement agreement with the tribe. I have provided again the language, which is an extract from the agreement itself. Fiscal had a number of questions as well. Again, we did extract this as part of the last meeting directly from the proposed agreement. I will say, and it is again mentioned in the narrative, that the county and the tribe certainly has differing opinions regarding the cost for services and related impacts. This, the $178,000 that is within the agreement that is paid over several years on a quarterly basis is a negotiated settlement amount. We had originally proposed to the tribe, both in the open sessions, and we had further discussions certainly regarding a variety of different formulas to use for mitigation. Again, those were discussed in open sessions. However, I will again restate that this is a negotiated settlement taking into, or a negotiated settlement amount taking into account several factors, looking at what the tribe provides in the terms of scope of services, and then also looking at, in turn, at what the county would then provide in terms of services to the proposed development. I restate here, again, an extract from the agreement, how the actual terms of the payment would work. It indicates, again, that the tribe would pay the county a flat annual fee of $178,000. The payment would expire upon the termination of the contract, which we see as 2040. And the tribe will comply with the terms of the Williamson Act contract on Camp 4, through December 31, 2023, and then payments would begin after the expiration of the Williamson Act contract. If the Williamson Act contract is canceled or terminated through the passage of 1491, the payments to the county would begin upon the completion of the first home on Camp 4. The payments to the county may qualify, in fact, as credits to the payments due under Section 5.2 and 5.3 of the tribe's state gaming compact, and the county has agreed to support the tribe in pursuing those credits. There are additional fiscal items that we did not indicate as part of our last meeting, but I wanted to point out to everyone. The tribe, as part of its mitigation monitoring plan, is also required to pay their fair share of infrastructure supports and improvements, and that includes several factors. In the near term, they'll pay their fair share of construction of roundabouts at State Route 246 and 154, which Caltrans is installing, and that's a fairly common approach to provide a fair share with surrounding entities. And then in terms of cumulative effects, longer term, the tribe is continuing to provide for signalization or roundabouts on 154 as well as 246. And that's to be determined by Caltrans, and I don't believe the exact cost of those are known at this time. In terms of the legislation, there was questions about why are we supporting 1491. And I believe that Supervisor Hartman referenced those reasons within her opening comments. 1491 allows the opportunity to reference the agreement as part of the legislation. And it's notice to Congress that there is in fact an agreement and the tribe has in fact waived their sovereign immunity to make this an enforceable agreement with the local government. I just wanted to indicate also, and it is stated within the narrative handout that is there, is that the enforceable agreement protects the county's interest. It does not impair the rights of citizens to move forward with any actions they may wish to take. The scope of the agreement, it addresses solely Camp 4, as we indicated previously. There were certainly discussions, as we referenced early on, about other opportunities, but the final agreement is specific to Camp 4. I would also indicate that in the absence of any type of fee to trust reform that mandates local government agreements with tribes, that is the current status and that is the reality that we're working within. In terms of the public process, we had several questions related to timing. I just wanted to make sure that all were aware, as referenced earlier, that we provided the information for the September 25th meeting as soon as it was available to do so. And as I've mentioned throughout my comments, where we could, we took exact extracts from the agreement in order to provide those to the community for comment. So we were doing the best we could to get things out to the community as early as we could, and I know that that was a concern for folks. So we did provide a summary of terms as soon as they were available. In addition, additional public meetings are scheduled. We have an additional meeting on the 9th, Monday evening at the Buellton Marriott. And then the board will be looking at the agreement on October 17th. In terms of next steps, as I mentioned, we have a set hearing that occurred the other day on October 3rd with the Board of Supervisors. Basically what that means is that the full agreement was put on the record so that the community could have immediate access to that. That is an unusual process for the county. We don't typically do set hearings in that way. But we were very interested in making sure that we got that agreement out to the community and to our board as soon as possible, and that alerted everyone to the fact that we were actually going to have the hearing on the 17th for the full board to consider the agreement. Today is our second public meeting. Our next public meeting, as I indicated, is on the 9th in the evening, and then the agreement will be considered by the tribe. It'll be considered by the Board of Supervisors. We'll begin working with the Department of the Interior as their approval is required, or they need to deem that their approval is not required. And then we will begin to work with legislators on amending 1491 to appropriately reference this agreement. And that concludes my presentation. I'll turn it back to Supervisor Hartman.
Thank you. So now is the time for public comment. And Gina Fisher of my staff will call people. I think we're going to have 1-minute speakers have the advantage of coming first, and 3-minute speakers will follow. And again, we're taking notes and recording so that we have all of your questions.
Thank you. I have 3 1-minute speaker slips. The timer's right here on my left, so I have to operate the timer and the slips at the same time today. When the time is up, you may hear a very faint. Okay, so if there are any other speaker slips, feel free to bring them forward to me now. Thank you. Okay, so our 1-minute speakers, our first speaker is Mike Hadley, followed by Kelly Gray, and followed by Jerry Rounds.
Good morning. I'm curious as to how Supervisor Williams was picked to be on this ad hoc committee, especially looking at your donations that you've received from tribal members throughout the state of California, which is a total of $171,400 since 2009. It's also curious to me that you've received $50,000 from the Chumash, and you received $18,000 from the Chumash after you got elected supervisor, when you didn't have to run in the general election because you won it at the primary. It just seems to me that there's a conflict. I realize you said you're not going to recuse yourself, but there's a perception, and the perception is not good.
Thank you. The next speaker is Kelly Gray, followed by Jerry Rounds.
100 special events per year basically would provide for one event every 3 or 4 days. What I'd like to know is what's considered an event. Will liquor be served at the events? I do know that the tribe has a second liquor license. I'm wanting to know if it will be used at Camp 4. Thank you.
The next speaker is Jerry Rounds.
Hi. I think the whole reason why we're here in the beginning, the whole issue is that the Chumash have decided that they don't want to pay local taxes and they don't want to have local control. And I'm extremely disappointed in the House of Representatives on a national level for facilitating this. And I wonder the motivations of people like LaMalfa. And in some ways, I think that this whole thing is kind of a dog and pony show because this is being forced down our throats and we don't really have much of an opportunity to modify it. And I know that you've said that you've got some agreements and things like that, but we also said that there's enforceability, but you said at the beginning that the Secretary of the Interior essentially said that the tribes don't have to keep their word once time passes. And I'm curious about that.
This is, please, this is such an important point that I need to make it in my opening remarks, in the middle, and at the end. If there is no local enforceable agreement, there are no controls that the county or the community has with regard to the land. If there is a local agreement that has a waiver of sovereign immunity, it is a private contract, and we can enforce it. That's our choice.
I received one more 1-minute speaker slip from Carrie Kendall.
So speaking as a local real estate broker, in representing buyers and sellers, the uncertainty of what's happening with Camp 4 has dramatically impacted the ability to move these properties. So I had 2 questions. One is the location of the development along Baseline and along Linda Vista. And with all that land, I'm curious as to why not moving that housing further into the land. If I was living there, I would want to see that beautiful vista and not look out onto other residents too. I'm sure the other people on Baseline and Linda Vista don't want to look on you guys for housing when they've got that beautiful open space. And then secondly, just is there language in this document that could be provided at the end of that period of time? What do we do? Is there another way to come back to the table? There should be some provision in there to talk about that.
Thank you. For the 3-minute speakers, the first speaker is Mary Beth Kerr, followed by Kim Schweitzer, followed by Mike Brady. Give me 1 second to read. Yes. Go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Mary Beth Kerr. I'm a lifelong Valley resident, and hold the mic down. I short. Okay, my name is Mary Beth Kerr. I'm a lifelong Valley resident. And 2.5 years ago, approximately, after back-to-back crashes at 154 and Roblar, I started a Facebook page and group that advocates for improved traffic safety throughout the San Ynez Valley. And my family and I live east of 154. I was able to review the EA document, for this project, volumes 1 and 2, and the projected traffic numbers are similar to those in similar traffic studies. And so I think they're kind of dead on. At the time of the EA report, the roundabout at 154-246 was being built. Other mitigations along 154 include further roundabouts at Edison, Roblar, and Grand. I'm aware that Caltrans is in the planning stages for the next roundabout, which would be built at Edison and 154. We know now that it is a four-way stop, but that it is very dangerous because many people run that stop at full speed. Lost my place. So Caltrans at this point for the Edison 154 roundabout has started the planning. They do not have the funding, but they're pressing for it. And we as a community can help press for that too. And overall, over the last 2.5 years, we've had a lot of conversations about roundabouts and adding them because some people don't like them. But for safety's sake and for fewer injuries and less severe injuries, roundabouts are wonderful. They also keep traffic flowing. And as I understand it, it would help just kind of break up the speeding that gets going that makes those uncontrolled intersections so horrible. Last week we had a crash at 154 Roblar, and it was just very lucky that everybody had, you know, airbags and such. The one thing that I would suggest to the County of Santa Barbara, and I'll be putting this in writing and throwing it out, is that I would hope that they would consider putting a four-way stop at Edison and Baseline, because that intersection is just a rural, everybody moves through there at different paces, and with just having the stops on the east and west sides, we've had a lot of crashes and we've had a lot of near misses, and one of those involved my sister getting injured pretty badly. And I want to share, I have had really good communication with the casino regarding traffic things, and as a longtime Valley resident, I support their being able to build housing in a hall.
Thank you. The next speaker is Kim Schweitzer, followed by Mike Brady, followed by Bill Crouch.
Good morning. I am curious as to why we even need to go from fee to trust for Camp 4. It appears to me that it's a money issue. I don't see how the Indian tribes' general overall conditions are improved other than the monetary factors. They seem to be able to provide enough funds to buy other corporations, and that's fine. But why do we need to supplement the Camp 4 fee to trust even at the House of Representatives level? It would appear to me that it's a wonderful windfall for the tribe, and I have nothing against the tribe. But it would seem to me that their housing conditions, their education conditions, their medical conditions, none of those are going to improve under Camp 4 going from fee to trust. So I'm curious why we even have the issue at all. It would appear to me that in your points under the recital points of this agreement, that there are some things that would be highly questionable. And it's pointed out that these are conditions to improve the tribe's overall condition. The BIA was established to improve the condition of American Indians, Native Indians in this country, of which there are close to 600 tribes. Many of those tribes live on really remote areas. They don't have good education, they don't have good training, they don't have good medical facilities. I don't see that that's the case for the Chumash Indians here in this valley. So I will submit my letter of questions rather than drag this through this particular forum, and hope that you will consider that. Thank you.
The next speaker is Mike Brady, followed by Bill Crouch, followed by Sharon Curry.
Good morning. Do you guys have a flashlight? I think I can read it. I'm not that old yet. I have a request that the October 17th Board of Supervisors meeting be rescheduled. The question to the county is, when in the past has the county considered signing a document of this import in less than 3 weeks from its publication? When has that happened in the past? I also request the county councils and their consulting councils written legal opinion about the enforceability of this document. I've spent 40 years reading contracts, and it seems to me that this language is overly loose, which makes it unenforceable. When you have statements like intended as good faith approximate mitigation of impacts, or in an effort to mutually agree, basically by its very nature, that makes this document unenforceable, or it makes it go to court to enforce it. To the county, would planning and development allow any development to occur in Santa Barbara County with this lack of specificity in the conditions of approval? Where in the MOA and incorporated EA and FONSI does it stipulate that this land is taken into trust for 143 houses and a tribal center only? For enrolled members? Are short-term rentals allowed? If the tribe need for housing units increases because of extended family or need for linear descendants, does Section 20 reopener provision allow the tribe such expansion? Although mutual agreement between the county and the tribe is, you say, is needed, the land is in trust. It's done. And so, it seems to me, you have the chip on your hands and you can expand that housing. Is there a height restriction on the housing? Is there a height restriction on the tribal center? How much of the $178,000 annual fee is eroded because of Section 3, 9E? If not already provided by the tribe, shouldn't it provide an engineer's cost estimate that projects the costs of Camp 4 infrastructure? Doesn't the county have a fiduciary obligation to know the fiscal impacts to the taxpayer of this MOI before they sign it? I have this list of questions here, and I think that they need to specifically be answered by both the tribe and the county. And by the way, I'm just taking a little bit more time. I have always supported tribal housing and a tribal center, and I believe in it strongly. And I will support you to get that, but I also support the community, and we have to work together.
The next speaker is Bill Crouch, followed by Sharon Curry, followed by Karen Jones.
Good morning. My first question goes back to the land use map using alternative B. The way the housing is distributed seems to be very inefficient in taking up more open space than would be necessary. For those residents on Linda Vista and Baseline, this is an intrusion into their neighborhood when at present the adjacent land is owned for one housing unit per 100 acres. In addition, housing next to a vineyard If you haven't lived next to a vineyard, I think you wouldn't find it very amenable, given that half the summer you have shotguns going off to scare the birds off. What I would propose to you is that you reconsider, and there is 300 acres along Armour Ranch Road, which would accommodate your housing, reduce the impermeable infrastructure, and reduce your cost. It would decrease the traffic on Baseline, which presently is over encumbered with traffic, and it would reduce the need for public transportation on Baseline. So if in fact this all passes, I would appreciate it if you would consider that. And I don't think the county has considered the declining property values along Baseline and Linda Vista, where you probably have close to $100 million worth of properties who will decline in value, therefore decrease the property tax revenue. And Supervisor Hartman, I think you mentioned initially that the full House, according to your lobbyist, will try and take this to the floor on suspension, which is not in anyone, well, it's in the tribe's best interest. It's not in our best interest. So my question to the tribe is, why would you enter into this agreement if you're so confident that H.R. 41 will pass on suspension? I don't see any advantage to the tribe to enter into this agreement. And in fact, I don't see a lot of advantage the way the agreement is written for the county to enter into the agreement. Another question is, what happens if the federal legislation is not enacted? The agreement assumes that H.R. 1491 will be amended to incorporate the terms of the agreement. What happens if H.R. 1491 is neither appropriately amended or not enacted? Is the agreement moot? And when you boil it all down, a little over 20 years, which isn't very long right now, you can do anything you want with the land. The county has no recourse. And I think that goes against what the community would like to see, and I think the tribe is not serving the best interest in the community of taking that position. So, thank you.
The next speaker is Sharon Curry, followed by Karen Jones, followed by Greg Paraskew.
My name is Sharon Curry. I'm a resident. I'm also a real estate agent, past president of the Association of Realtors several times, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm very involved in the real estate community and this issue for years. My first point I want to make is that none of the documents that I have read address the TCA map. It may seem like it's not the same thing, but it is. It was brought up early on as an end run to easily annex Camp 4. I realize it was withdrawn, but we have no guarantees that it will not come back to life. 11,500 acres is a lot of dirt. That almost affected people in an emotional way more than Camp 4 did. So I think we should have some language in this agreement that guarantees that the TCA map will not be brought forward again. When the corner of McMurray and Highway 246 was developed, that developer was really smart. He came to the Association of Realtors and he explained to us what he wanted to build on that corner. And he went and visited every single neighbor, everyone. And he helped them understand what was going on that corner. And from that outreach, they were able to get everybody on board. There was nobody that was afraid. They knew exactly what was going in there. That's been part of the problem here. We've really never known what the plan was. Now we know that the plan is to develop that Linda Vista corridor. So I reiterate with what Carrie Kendall said, in that you have 1,400 acres. There's no reason that people on Linda Vista have to look at your cultural center or your backyard or live next door to an event center, which this cultural center is clearly designed for. 100 events a year is a lot. So to mitigate the impacts on neighbors, I really do suggest that you build this someplace else on your 1,400 acres, not next to Linda Vista. Lastly, I'd like to address traffic. It's a big thing. I don't think Baseline or Armour Ranch are really suitable for that. Armor Ranch is no visibility, baseline's already crowded. Both are two-lane highways with tractors and bicyclists and things like that. So I don't really have an answer for you there, but I do think that we need to think about where the exits and entrances from this development are going to go. Here again, if they're not close to Linda Vista and they're more mid 1,400 acres, we're going to be using less of those roads, and perhaps some widening can happen there. Thank you for your time.
The next speaker is Karen Jones, followed by Greg Periscu, followed by Richard Klein.
Hello. Doss Williams described a very interesting and unusual occurrence in getting here. He says that he hitchhiked. That is an interesting and unusual occurrence. I had a similar interesting and unusual occurrence yesterday having my morning eggs. I have eggs every breakfast. The third egg I cracked had brown. And I thought of my father-in-law. On his way overseas in World War II, he bit into a bad boiled egg. So when I saw that brown, I'm like, oh, Bud! And then the stench rose out of that egg, and I screamed and threw the egg and screamed for my husband because he does the dirty work. So that was so weird to get my first bad egg. And when I hear you say that perfect is the enemy of good, the worst enemy of good is bad. And eating that bad egg was so, the thought of it is just unacceptable. I skipped breakfast yesterday. I didn't eat. I'm not eating a bad egg. And so that is my analogy to your perfect is the enemy of good. Sometimes it's better to do nothing than to do something really foolish. And this is a foolish agreement. And the more people try and assure me about enforceability, you forget that in less than 20 years, I've watched a bingo hall turn into a 12-story skyscraper. And some of you may live away from the town. I'm breathing the brake dust. I'm having my vehicle stolen. I'm having people passed out on drugs in my driveway. I have to get the police to haul this woman off. I've had a guy with a bloody head bang on my door asking to use the phone. I've had multiple people come up on our yard and ask for money. So it definitely affects the fiber of our community, our rural culture. And it also reminds me that I have a culture, small town girl, but my husband's family is Native, and they go back to the Ortega family, and it is clearly documented, and it is not financially biased. We are proud of our family heritage. We are not making a buck. The house always wins. The house always wins, and that's why Doss Williams, Doug LaMalfa, Salud Carbajal, all have a very strong financial bias to get this thing through. I believe that Joan's intentions are good, but I think that you are succumbing to bullying from your own party. I know Kevin McCarthy. He was my Young Republicans president. And I say that we spend our time now contacting Kevin McCarthy, Duncan Hunter, everybody we can in Congress to stop this. You have failed.
The next speaker is Greg Periscu, followed by Richard Klein, followed by C.J. Jackson.
Good morning, Chair Hartman, Chairman Kahn, Supervisor Williams. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. My name is Greg Periscu. My wife and I live here in San Ynez. I want to address a couple of the issues. The open view corridor on 154 is terrific. It allows those people driving through our beautiful valley to see the rolling hills and the bucolic views. But what about the residents who live here? Why is there no open view corridor along Baseline and along Armor Ranch? Secondly, as I see the diagram, the plan of the roads, it looks to me like one of the entrances into the Camp 4 area will be very close to the roundabout on Armor Ranch Road, just east of the roundabout. That's a very dangerous spot. It's a hilly road, as most of you, I'm sure, know. And if people are making left-hand turns to get into the Camp 4 location, it creates a real hazard because there are a lot of blind spots when you come over a hill that you can't see traffic that might be turning left. And it's particularly aggravated on the days that you have one of the 100 events a year that you're suggesting, because you're going to have hundreds of cars coming in trying to get into the facility there, and it's going to create a real traffic hazard and a danger for the residents as well as for the visitors to the area. My wife and I have lived here for a little over 17 years now, and I've watched the dynamics between the community and the tribe over time. And I watched that relationship deteriorate over time. And what people in the community tell me when I ask them about that is that their perception, whether it's right or wrong, it's their perception. And that makes it a reality that has to be addressed and dealt with. The perception is that there's a lack of trust because the tribe has not always kept some of the promises that they have made to the community. And I believe in trying to think about this and how we might be able to bridge that lack of trust and bring the community and the tribe back together again. And I hope, Chairman Khan, you'll take these in the spirit that I intend them to be, because I want them to be, I want the community and the tribe to be able to get along and have a good, positive relationship. And that would be for the tribe to have a more transparent process, much like our Board of Supervisors does, where they have open meetings, the public is invited, the media is invited, they post agendas, they post budgets, they post minutes, they post all the documents and so forth. So I would just suggest that maybe in the future the tribe might think about having a more open, transparent process. Thank you.
The next speaker is Richard Klein, followed by CJ Jackson, followed by Richard Crutchfield.
Supervisors, Chairman Khan, thank you very much for holding these meetings. We really appreciate it. And Chairman Khan, thank you for the great work that the Chumash tribe does do in our community. There are a number of things that you contribute that are vital to the benefit of this community. However, with regard to this agreement, as a speaker said at our earlier meeting, the devil's in the details. An initial review of this agreement shows that the devil has been hard at work. We appreciate the answers that you've given to the questions that we asked a week and a half ago, but how soon will they be on the website? We hope it'll be soon, and we need time to review those questions as we need time to review this overall agreement. Now, in slightly less time than the 2 weeks or the week and a half that we've had to review this and make comments, and you've asked us to review more than 1,100 pages of documents in just a week and a half. That's outrageous. It's grievously unreasonable time for the public. And question, how does the county reconcile its previous legal arguments against Camp 4 environmental assessment, EA, and now supporting an agreement with the Chumash that relies on it? The proposed agreement reflects an absolute and complete reversal of the county's previous position on Camp 4. In fact, the county's gone to court on behalf of the residents and the taxpayers, asserting that the environmental analysis undertaken by the federal government on Camp 4 is wholly inadequate. Now the proposed agreement incorporates this flawed analysis. The county provides no justification for this complete flip-flop, nor scientific or economic analysis. Another question is what guarantees the amount of land, the acreage noted in Alternative B, stays in open space and ag use once the land is in trust, which the agreement says it is. Then under sovereignty, anything can be changed even before 2040. Also, Supervisor Williams, you mentioned that that the board does not have the power to stop 1491, and this is the best agreement achievable. Well, I believe, and I believe many of the folks here do, as it now stands, this is a fatally flawed agreement. It's a prime example of politicians willing to make any deal, no matter how bad it is, as opposed to no deal. There is no significant benefit to the local community, and it does not protect the environment and rural character of the San Ynez Valley. Significantly revise it or reject it. Thank you.
The next speaker is CJ Jackson, followed by Richard Crutchfield, followed by Jim Marino.
Chair Hartman, Chairman Khan, CJ Jackson, I'm here today on behalf of the San Ynez Valley Concerned Citizens, as I have been for the better part of 18 years. I'm vested in this discussion. Chairman Khan, you and I are going to be here long after this one goes. We're in the land. My dream for this meeting was that the community and tribe sat together, looked globally at the future of the San Ynez Valley, and concluded certain key principles. One, intensification of development. What does it mean? What is our shared perspective on that? But no, now I have to hurry. I have to engage on a document I barely had a chance to read. And I want to go to my constituents, the people who have supported me these past 18 years, and make a case for them that this is the right thing to do. But the time frame is too compacted. So here goes my litany of elements. The document says that it affirms in 1491. 1491 affirms the director's decision on January 19th, which affirmed the Western Regional Director's decision, which was premised on the TCA, premised on a diminished standard of environmental review. Is that the case? If so, how do we deal and reconcile with the compact, which, when signed 3 to 4 years in advance of its maturity, has a higher standard of environmental review, specifically as it applies to cumulative impacts? What you have in this situation, sadly, is a textbook definition of piecemealing. And I know that, having been involved in the planning process and having been held to the standard of you don't piecemeal a development. There is a standard in the language, and the language, I could devote a half an hour to talking about language because we need a relationship that isn't strained by language. A couple of other questions. The traffic burdens that flow off were not identified relative to future tribal projects that have already been initiated, inclusive of the expanse of the hotel. Traffic has not been studied well. It needs to look further. Secondly, it talks about a deadline and applies to the compact that state that you, sir, signed after the government approved it. And it has a host of things. But when we talk about 2040, this compact was renegotiated 4 years before its maturity. If the compact is renegotiated, what does it do to your agreement? I don't understand. There are other elements. I'll talk about what is happening with solid waste. You've talked about wastewater, but the solid waste, will that be going and trucked on the highway? Will that be the reason that you have that there is a suggestion of additional traffic burden coming off on Highway 154? The Air Quality Management Board assesses an expectation of the County of Santa Barbara, and you successfully challenged the EPA over travel in the harbor. Well, is there a separate baseline that will be established for tribal properties, or are those properties part of your cumulative burden that you have to deal with? We have to look at other ancillary elements of this agreement and the other regulatory portions of it to see if you do not contradict the language in those agreements, because then it renders this document confusing. Please, I will be supplementing with more of these elements, but 3 minutes just doesn't do it. I want to work together, Chairman Khan. I think we can.
The next speaker is Richard Crutchfield, followed by Jim Marino, and the last speaker slip I have is for David Kosinu.
Morning, Chairman Khan, Supervisors Hartman and Williams, and their staffs. I'm sure that the Tribal Chair and County Supervisors will be sensitive to recommendations and edits concerning the proposed agreement. but these must be taken in the context of moving towards the completion of an agreement. I ponder sometimes at what could have been accomplished if the hours and dollars spent on this conflict were directed to joint projects between the Chumash tribe and Valley residents, an array of athletic fields for Valley youth, a Valley Boys and Girls Club, expanded up-to-date libraries in every city in the Valley. We need to complete this agreement and move beyond it. In the final analysis, this is a matter of trust. Only when agreement is in place will we be able to determine if the tribe and county will remain true to their pledges. As the adage says, the proof of the pudding will be in the tasting. I salute the work that's gone into this for the people on that side of the table and for the people on this side of the table. Thank you.
The next speaker is Jim Marino, and the final speaker slip, unless anyone else wants to give me a speaker slip, is David Kozanu.
Chairman Kahn, members of the board that are here and staff, good morning. The county has taken a position that this land, Camp 4 land, was taken into trust in January, so it's already in trust. In the presentation, you indicated that nothing in this agreement takes away the rights of the citizens of this valley. The citizens of this valley have a right to challenge the taking of that land into trust, just like the county did when they filed their lawsuit and said this wasn't legal. Obviously, if you support a bill that's in Congress that says, no, everything that was done illegally is now legal, like dispensation, and nobody can sue, and they're forever barred, you're taking rights away from everybody in this county and in the state. So you can't say you're not taking rights away from people. By supporting a bill that does, you are. The land use issues that were presented up here, as I think Mike Brady pointed out, point to the specific place in this contract or the legislation that says they have to build 143 houses and a tribal facility as they've described as a proposal for, I think they call it B, for the land. Proposals are nothing. Proposals are what they had in the Deheza Valley case you cited. Remember that? Their proposal was they wanted the land into trust to build housing. And as soon as it was in trust, it became part of the casino complex. That was a proposal. Proposals don't get it. You need specifics, item by item in the contract or the legislation, which is not going to happen, that says you can't build anything but 143 houses. You can only use this much water. Where's that? Is that in the agreement, spelling out how much water can be used from the aquifer under that land? And that's one of the requirements in the Winters case, and as it applies in California now under the Agua Caliente case, you have to specify how much water and what it's going to be used for. That's not in this agreement anywhere. In fact, this agreement doesn't even specify there's no gaming out there. I attended every single ad hoc committee meeting, and over Supervisor Adams said, well, let's put no gambling, no gaming in the contract. Chairman Armenta, Mr. Khan's predecessor, refused, absolutely. No, 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 right down the line every single time. Wouldn't put it in the agreement. So if it's not in the agreement, it's only in Senate Bill, or Assembly Bill 1491 as a provision in there. And we know it can happen to a provision in a bill in Congress because maybe next year they simply amend it and take it out. So it should be in this agreement. My question is, why isn't it in the agreement? But anyway, I've run out of time, and I could certainly go on for a little while longer about this agreement. So what I think I'll do is put the stuff in writing for what it's worth and submit it to you so you can understand my perspective. Thank you.
The final speaker is David Kozanu.
Good morning. David Cousineau from Capello and Noel, and we represent San Lucas Ranch. I've spoken to you before about why this does not comply with the community plan, and I'm not going to repeat that. Today, I want to talk about the agreement that is in front of you. As some background, I have negotiated many contracts. I have had clients come to me with contracts that they have negotiated and say, David, can we enter into this contract? And there are times where I've had to say, I cannot recommend that you enter this contract. This is not a good contract. I have also seen people enter into agreements, be very happy with the agreement that they have reached, and then a couple of years later, get into huge litigations because they misunderstood the terms. They didn't have agreement as to the terms. And I want to point out a couple of things. People have pointed out concerns with the language of the agreement, with the looseness of the agreement. Now let me point out a couple of things that could create big problems. And these are just things that have jumped out at me today. Excuse me, so I'm sure there are many more. If you look at page 8, the section under land use, it says that the tribe shall comply with the final EA, FONSI, and alternative B as referenced on pages 2-3, pages 2-12 to 2-16, and table 2-2 on page 2-15 of the final EA. But now, let's look at the responses, the comments that we received. There were concerns raised about the housing size. And what was referenced is the final EA at page 2-4. 2-4 is not one of the pages that relates to alternative B. So does that apply to alternative B? That has not been spelled out. That's going to cause problems sometime down the road. Again, looking at the responses that we received today, mitigation. I see a list of 4 bullet points that describe mitigation that the tribe is going to do. But when I look at the agreement, sorry. When I look at page 7, no. When I look at page 8 of the agreement, 7 and 8 of the agreement, the tribe has agreed to pay money, but any additional impacts to the county from the development of Camp 4, as outlined in section 4 below, including without limitation law enforcement, fire, and traffic roads, will be mitigated solely by the county at no additional cost to the tribe. So here again, we have a conflict. That's going to create problems later. This agreement has been rushed and is not something that should be entered into. Thank you.
I have no more speaker slips at this time.
Thank you, and thank you for all the issues that you raised for us. And Chairman Khan, would you like to make a closing statement, and then Supervisor Williams, and then I have a few comments?
Sure. Thank you again for coming out and listening to aspects of our agreement and our project. We've worked very hard with both the initial ad hoc committee and with the existing ad hoc committee, and also have listened and commented based on the EA in 2013 and also in 2014 with the final EA. And so we have heard a lot of different questions and a lot of good ideas along the way as well. So we're just committed to this process. I think a speaker had asked earlier about why are we here if the land's going to go in trust anyways. Well, we're here because we're part of this community. And it's very important for us because we go to the same schools and supermarkets, and I've given this spiel before, but it's very important to the tribe and to a lot of our community members and friends to really bring this issue to a close and find common ground. So again, we'll stick through this process and work hard to reassure both the tribe and the community that we can all live together in harmony. So thank you.
Well, I'm just not an all or nothing person. I I guess to use the egg metaphor, that I'm not the guy who's going to take the whole batch of eggs after you've cracked them all and put them on the pan and throw it all out because there was one bag egg. I'm going to sit there and I'm going to try my best to carve out that bad egg and maybe give the cat the bad egg and I'm going to eat the rest of those eggs. And why am I like that? That's who I am. My grandfather was a POW in a Japanese camp for 4 years, and my grandmother lived in occupied Europe throughout her teenage years. We don't waste stuff. We fight for every inch. And so to me, the bottom line is every acre saved is a victory. And I'm politicians that to me take the easy way out and just, pound their chest, say, I'm going to fight till the end for an unwinnable victory. They have nothing but my disdain because I don't think that's really going to bat for you. I think that's fake. There were some questions about the financial issue. I think it's important to note that we had two routes. We could have gone a route of a number minus offsets of money the tribe was already paying or would be paying through other agreements, or a concrete number. I think at the end of the day, we felt a concrete number was more transparent and would also not mean it was zero, right? Because you could have a big number and then minus the offsets, and all of a sudden it's nothing, right? Because the tribe obviously is providing a lot of money for fire and public safety through other means and transportation, as was articulated. Let me see it. Look at my notes. I haven't looked at them, and then all of a sudden they go away. I think it's important to note that the agreement still stands if the legislation fails. I've heard stories for 7 years about how some of you guys, own some bigwigs or have a buddy in some bigwigs in the Republican Party back in D.C. and you're going to make this go away magically. I've heard those stories for 7 years. If those stories are real, you go at it. Though the advantage and the drawback of legislation is if you do not believe that the county has the power to enforce this as a contract, which we do believe that it does, but if you don't, it's definitely enforceable as federal legislation. So that would create additional guarantees and certainty for you if that legislation passed. Of course, the drawback was already, for some of you, was already articulated, is that it would terminate the litigation. Contributions don't create fealty. In Sacramento over the last 6 years, I've supported the tribe on some things and I've fought them on others. I opposed the early termination of Williamson Act on Camp 4. I supported renewal of a contract because it was compact, because it was a much better compact for the community. I pissed them off by authoring some legislation down in Ventura, that they didn't like. It's not about fealty. It is about being able to work with people to try to get the best thing done that's possible. I think there was some good questions asked. We will endeavor to continue to answer more of them. I think we've answered many, most, if not all, of the questions that came up last time. I know we're going to spend some time next time on the TCA. A legal opinion on enforcement and these answers to be posted on the website with alacrity are both reasonable requests, and we'll do our best to meet those requests.
Well, first of all, I thank you so much for being here, for being invested, and for really taking this seriously and trying to help us through this process. The materials that you received today went up on the website today. We will be answering additional questions on the website in a rolling fashion. The agreement references the entire environmental assessment. The quotes or the citations were having to do with a particular area, but the agreement includes the entire environmental assessment. The point that I keep hearing and somehow don't seem to get across is that we are operating in a context not of our making, but constraints that we have to figure out how to live within. And the fee to trust law and the way that it's enforced is one of those constraints. If we do nothing, we have no control. If we sign an enforceable contract on the effective date of that contract, we have control, whether or not the bill passes or not. So please understand, because even in people's comments, I didn't what we are trying to prevent is some unpredictable, unforeseen thing from happening on Camp 4. I'd also like to say that the tribe, as some comments noted, didn't have to sit down with us. They did because they want to establish a basis for going forward. We wished we could have done a global agreement. We weren't able to, but what we were able to do is establish a conversation and a dialogue. And I hope that dialogue can expand to include the community going forward. But that means we have to take a positive step. We have to turn our backs on the negatives of the past and look forward. And I think we can do that. I have a lot of faith in the people in this community. And if we want to turn a corner, if we want to make a better future, then we have to come together and map that out. And I believe, in my experience, every meeting, the business committee of the tribe was there. They didn't have to be. And we have an opportunity now to continue, even on the things we weren't able to get into this agreement, to continue the dialogue. And I really liked the idea about what is our vision? I mean, how can we jointly craft a vision going forward? But if we can't even do this, then the prospects aren't very good. So we're going to be wrestling with your questions. I think we have answers to most of them. We're going to come back on Monday night. Monday night will be a repeat of much of what we had, and then we'll carve out the new questions. So I'm not sure exactly how we'll time that, but I think many of the points are worth hearing again and again. So again, I thank you very much, and I hope we'll see you on Monday. And we have October 17th, where the board is actually the decision maker, and they can continue this if they have to. Thank you.